A marine's discovery. The desert sun beat down on Sergeant Marcus Riley's neck as he patrolled the perimeter fence. Dust devils danced in the distance, mocking the stillness of the morning. He wiped the sweat from his brow, the gritty sand clinging to his skin. A glint of silver caught his eye. Not the fence itself, but something tangled within the barbs. As he got closer, the glint resolved into fur, tawny fur matted with blood. A bobcat, caught in the wire. Its breathing was shallow, ragged gasps that rasped in the quiet air. Riley approached cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm, but he stopped himself. The animal was clearly in distress, not a threat. "Easy there, kitty," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. He knelt, the sharp scent of blood and fear stinging his nostrils. The bobcat's eyes, usually fierce and predatory, were wide with pain and terror. One leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, caught deep within the barbs. Carefully, Riley pulled out his knife. The steel was cool against his sweaty palm. With slow, deliberate movements, he began to cut the wire, wincing each time the barbs shifted, tightening their hold. The bobcat whimpered, a pathetic sound that tugged at Riley's heart. Finally, the leg was free. Riley gently lifted the bobcat, cradling it in his arms. It was surprisingly light, its fur coarse against his skin. He could feel the tremors racking its small body. He quickly assessed the damage. The leg was definitely broken, and there were several deep lacerations along its flank. It needed a vet, and fast. "Don't you worry," Riley said, his voice thick with concern. "We'll get you fixed up." He started back towards the base, the bobcat nestled against his chest. Each step sent a jolt of pain through his own body as he carefully avoided jarring the injured animal. Soldiers stared as he approached, their faces a mixture of surprise and amusement. Riley ignored them, his focus solely on the injured creature in his arms. He reached the medical bay, bursting through the doors. "Doc," he called out, his voice urgent. "We've got an injured animal here. Needs your help." Doc Hemmings, a wiry man with a perpetually worried expression, looked up from his paperwork. His eyebrows shot up when he saw the bobcat. "Riley, what in the blue blazes?" "No time to explain, Doc," Riley interrupted. "It's hurt bad. Can you help it?" Hemmings hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right. Bring it over here. Let's see what we can do." Hope and heartbreak. Sergeant Riley burst through the clinic doors, Bob cradled carefully in his arms. The bell above the door jingled a frantic welcome. "Doc Evans? I need your help, please." "Found him. Hit by a car, I think." Dr. Evans, a woman whose face seemed etched with the stories of countless creatures, emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on a stained apron. "Hold your horses, Sergeant. Let's have a look." She gestured towards an examination table. "Gently now." Riley laid Bob down. The bobcat whimpered, a pathetic, breathy sound. Dr. Evans's hands moved with practiced efficiency, her touch firm but gentle as she probed Bob's limbs. She palpated his abdomen, her brow furrowing. The air hung thick with the antiseptic scent of the clinic and the metallic tang of blood. "Compound fracture of the right hind leg," as she announced, her voice devoid of emotion. "Possible internal injuries. He's lost a lot of blood." She shone a penlight into Bob's eyes, then sighed, a puff of air that seemed to carry the weight of her experience. Riley watched, his hope slowly draining away. Can you fix him, Doc?" Dr. Evans met his gaze, her eyes a surprisingly soft blue in her weathered face. "Sergeant, I can stabilize him. I can pump him full of painkillers. But the damage is extensive." "The kindest thing," as she trailed off, letting the unspoken words hang in the air. "No," O'Reilly said, his voice tight. "There has to be something." "Surgery? Anything?" She shook her head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. The surgery alone would be brutal, and recovery, even if he survived, he'd never be the same. He wouldn't thrive in the wild. Confined to a cage, is that what you want for him? Riley looked down at Bob, his fur matted with dirt and blood. He saw not a wild creature, but a being in pain, a creature he'd sworn to protect. The weight of his decision settled heavy in his chest. "No," he whispered, the word barely audible. Dr. Evans placed a hand on his arm, her touch surprisingly comforting. "I know this isn't easy, Sergeant. But sometimes, the hardest decisions are the kindest." She paused. "I'll prepare the injection. You can stay with him." Riley nodded, his throat too constricted to speak. He reached out and gently stroked Bob's head, feeling the soft fur beneath his fingers. The bobcat nuzzled weakly against his hand. Hope, a fragile flicker, had died, leaving only the cold, hard reality of heartbreak. A final embrace. "Easy, Bob," O'Reilly murmured, his voice a low rumble against the bobcat's coarse fur. He stroked behind Bob's ears, the familiar gesture strangely comforting to him as well. Bob trembled, a shallow, rattling breath escaping his lungs. "You're a good cat. A strong cat." He knew the words were hollow, but he hoped, somehow, they offered Bob a sliver of peace. Dr. Evans prepped the syringe, her movements efficient and devoid of sentimentality. "Ready when you are, Riley." Her voice was flat, betraying nothing. She'd seen this too many times to count. Riley nodded, his throat tight. "Okay." He shifted Bob slightly, giving Dr. Evans access. He kept his hand firmly on Bob's flank, feeling the shallow rise and fall of his chest. The prick of the needle was barely perceptible. Bob flinched, a low growl rumbling in his chest, then relaxed back against Riley. The trembling subsided slightly. "It's okay, Bob," O'Reilly whispered, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't anticipated. "It's going to be okay." He continued to stroke him, feeling the warmth slowly leach from Bob's body. Then, something unexpected happened. Bob, with a surge of unexpected strength, lifted his head. He nudged it against Riley's chest, a soft, almost pleading movement. It wasn't just a brush. It was a deliberate, almost desperate press. He held it there for a long moment, his body shuddering one last time. And then, he was still. Riley held his breath, his own chest aching. He continued to stroke Bob's fur, his fingers tracing the lines of his face, the curve of his ears. He felt Dr. Evans' hand on his shoulder, a brief, awkward pat. "His gone, Riley." Riley swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the bobcat's lifeless eyes. "Yeah," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Yeah, he is." But as he looked down at the animal nestled against him, he couldn't shake the feeling that Bob had somehow, in his final moments, offered him something profound. A connection. A silent thank you. A hug. The mysterious color. The air in the examination room hung thick with the sterile scent of antiseptic. Dr. Evans peeled off her gloves, the latex snapping like a firecracker. "Poor thing," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Bob, the bobcat Sergeant Riley had brought in earlier, was now still on the steel table. The tranquilizer had worn off hours ago, revealing the extent of the internal injuries. There was nothing more to be done. She reached for the body disposal bag, a familiar weariness settling in her bones. This was the part of her job she hated most. As she ran a final hand over Bob's matted fur, preparing to lift him, her fingers snagged on something unexpected. Frowning, she parted the thick fur around Bob's neck. It wasn't a tick, nor a burr. It was a collar. Not a cheap, plastic thing one might expect from a domesticated cat. This was different. The base was a strip of supple, dark leather, almost black with age and wear. But it was the ornamentation that caught her breath. Intricate silver filigree, twisted into knotwork patterns she couldn't quite place, adorned the leather. Tiny, polished stones, like chips of obsidian, were embedded within the silver. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen on a wild animal. "Riley," as she called out, her voice sharper than she intended. She hadn't even realized he was still there, sitting quietly in the corner. He startled, rising to his feet. "Everything all right, Doc?" She held up the collar. "Take a look at this." Riley approached cautiously, his brow furrowed. He took the collar from her outstretched hand, turning it over in his large fingers. The silver gleamed faintly under the harsh fluorescent lights. He ran a thumb over one of the obsidian chips. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice low. "Under his fur. Hidden." Dr. Evans crossed her arms, her usual impatience returning. "This isn't some off-the-rack pet store item, Riley. What the hell was a bobcat doing with something like this?" Riley shook his head, his gaze fixed on the collar. "I don't know, Doc. But I've seen things out there in the desert, things you wouldn't believe. Maybe this is one of them." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "You think it's some kind of tracking device?" "Too ornate. Too old," Evans countered. "And besides, I already scanned him for implants. Nothing." She tapped her foot. "This is just, or weird. An ancient message." Riley's hands, calloused from years of training and field work, were surprisingly gentle as he held the bobcat steady. Dr. Evans, her brow furrowed in concentration, snipped the final strand of the makeshift snare that had nearly cost the animal its life. The air hung thick with a metallic tang of blood and the earthy scent of the forest floor. "All right, Sergeant, easy now," Dr. Evans instructed, her voice clipped but laced with a thread of concern. "Let's get this collar off. It's digging in something awful." The collar, a crude thing fashioned from thick leather, was stiff and unyielding. Riley worked at the buckle, his fingers slipping slightly on the worn material. Finally, with a soft click, it sprang open. As he lifted it away from the bobcat's matted fur, something shifted inside. A small, tightly rolled piece of parchment slid out and landed with a whisper on the table. Evans's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" She reached for it with a gloved hand, her usual impatience evident. "Looks like a note," O'Reilly said, his gaze fixed on the tiny scroll. He watched as Dr. Evans carefully unfurled the fragile parchment. The paper crackled softly, threatening to disintegrate with each movement. "Well, let's see what it says," as she muttered, peering at the document. Her expression changed rapidly from curiosity to bewilderment. She held the parchment closer to the light filtering through the clinic window. "That's not English," as she announced, her voice laced with a hint of surprise. She flipped the parchment over, examining the other side. "Definitely not. I don't recognize it. Looks almost or ancient." The script was unlike anything Riley had ever seen. The characters were intricate, almost like stylized drawings, flowing and looping in a way that defied any language he knew. It was a stark contrast to the mundane brutality of the snare that had held the Bobcat captive. Some kind of code? Riley suggested, leaning closer. Dr. Evans shook her head. No, it doesn't feel like a code. It feels, or older, like a language that's been lost. She tapped the parchment with a fingernail. This could be significant. Where did this color come from, Sergeant? Do you remember anything about the area? E. Whispers of the past. Riley cradled the injured bobcat, its shallow breaths ghosting against his palm. The animal's fur, matted with blood and dirt, felt brittle beneath his fingers. He glanced at Dr. Evans, her brow furrowed in concentration as she prepped a sedative. His stable for now, as she said, her voice tight. But that wound, it's like nothing I've ever seen. Later, after the bobcat had been euthanized, the strange symbols etched into the ancient arrowhead lodged in its side continued to haunt Riley. He sat with Dr. Evans in her cluttered office, the arrowhead resting on a sterile pad between them. I've seen hundreds of arrowheads, Riley said, running a hand through his close-cropped hair. Never anything like this. What is that language? Dr. Evans sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. That's what we're going to find out. They spent the next few days scouring online databases, academic journals, and contacting anyone they thought might have expertise in ancient languages. Dead ends piled up like unread mail. Finally, a contact at the university suggested Dr. Arlo Hastings, a linguist and historian specializing in indigenous languages of North America. Dr. Hastings' office was a sanctuary of books and artifacts. He peered at the arrowhead through thick spectacles, his fingers tracing the strange glyphs. The air in the room, thick with the scent of old paper and dust, crackled with anticipation. Intriguing, he murmured, adjusting his glasses. Very intriguing. This is a dialect of a language spoken by a tribe that predates any currently known civilization in this region. These symbols are archaic, even for them. He pulled a massive, leather-bound volume from a shelf. Let me see. Here we are. A partial Rosetta Stone, if you will. He pointed to a faded illustration of similar symbols. This translates roughly to guardian, protector, an awakening. Riley felt a shiver crawl down his spine. Awakening? Awakening what? Dr. Hastings shrugged, his gaze distant. That, Sergeant, is the question, isn't it? The context is lost to time. But the word awakening often suggests a period of significant change, a disruption of the natural order. He looked up, his eyes meeting Riley's. Or a return to it. Guardian of the land. Dr. Evans squinted at the projected symbols, her brow furrowed in concentration. Riley stood beside her, the scent of antiseptic and something vaguely floral hanging in the air. He shifted his weight, the silence stretching taut. The bobcat, still unconscious, lay on a nearby steel table, breathing shallowly. All right, Riley, Dr. Evans finally said, her voice raspy. Let's see if I can make some sense of this, assuming it is sense. She tapped a stylus against the holographic projection. These symbols, they're archaic, almost pre-linguistic. A dialect of a language family long extinct, linked to nature worship. Riley frowned. Nature worship? You mean like old pagan stuff? Something like that. The gist of it is this, as she continued, pointing to a series of interconnected glyphs. It. Bob is not just a bobcat. She paused, as if reluctant to say the words. He's ear guardian. A spirit of this land. And he's warning us. The symbols speak of a sickness, a corruption spreading through the earth. A poison that will choke the life from everything if it isn't stopped. Riley stared at the bobcat, then back at the projection. Poison? What kind of poison? Dr. Evans sighed, running a hand through her already disheveled hair. The specifics are vague. But the implication is clear. Something is deeply wrong. It speaks of a creeping darkness that consumes the balance of nature. She tapped the screen again, highlighting a symbol that resembled a twisted tree root. This is a symbol of decay. And this, she indicated another, showing a stylized drop of water. This is water, corrupted. A chill snaked down Riley's spine, despite the warmth of the clinic. He thought of the strange, metallic taste he'd noticed in the stream earlier that day. He'd dismissed it then, attributing it to the old pipes near the base. Now, he wasn't so sure. How long? Riley asked, his voice tight. How long before this poison takes hold? Dr. Evans' expression was grim. The message is fragmented. But the tone is urgent. Imminent. Even. We don't have much time, Sergeant. She looked from the projection to the unconscious bobcat, a flicker of something akin to respect in her eyes. He knew. He was trying to warn us. The cloying floral scent intensified, or perhaps Riley was just noticing it more. It was the scent of fear mingling with fragile hope. The shaman's guidance. The air, thick with moisture, pressed down on Riley and Dr. Evans as they followed the meandering trail further into the reservation's heart. The sun, a blazing forge in the sky, hammered at them, turning the ochre soil to a fine dust that coated their boots and clothes. Riley cradled the bobcat, its inert bulk a constant, melancholic reminder of their mission. Its breaths came in ragged gasps. They reached Elder Kai, who sat on a woven mat in the shade of a sprawling, ancient oak. His face, a tapestry woven with wrinkles, spoke volumes of experience. He observed their approach, his dark eyes, like polished jet, giving nothing away. Dr. Evans initiated the conversation, her tone unusually subdued. Elder Kai, we seek your wisdom. We discovered this creature, she indicated Riley and the bobcat with a gesture, close to death, and found this. She delicately offered the piece of parchment. Kai accepted the parchment, his touch light as a feather. He scrutinized the symbols, a slight crease forming on his brow. Anticipation hung in the air, the silence broken only by the shrill song of cicaders. At last, he spoke, his voice a deep, resonant murmur. These are ancient glyphs, telling of a disturbance, a sickness plaguing the land. The harmony is shattered. His gaze shifted to Riley, then to the bobcat in his arms. This animal is but a symptom. The root of the malady lies deeper. Riley shifted his weight, the bobcat feeling like a stone burden. Can you tell us where, Elder? Kai closed his eyes, his hand resting on the parchment as if drawing power from it. He remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, as though listening to the very heartbeat of the earth. When he opened his eyes, they reflected a profound sorrow. The symbols guide us to the old quarry, to the north. A place where the earth was ripped open, its secrets violated. Something has stirred there. A prickle of unease began to erode Dr. Evans' professional detachment. What kind of something? Kai shook his head slowly, a gesture of grim resignation. The glyphs offer no name. Only that it is a darkness, a force that poisons life. Tread carefully, Sergeant. This is not a fight you can win with mere arms. He glanced at the bobcat, its breathing weakening with each passing moment. Its spirit ebbs. The hour is upon us. The weight in Riley's arms felt crushing. He looked at Dr. Evans, a silent plea in his eyes. She nodded, her expression a mask of empathy. The quarry, the strange symbols, the failing bobcat, the convergence of these elements painted a bleak and unsettling picture. Time was slipping through their fingers. A promise fulfilled. Riley knelt beside the bobcat, its fur matted with blood and dust. He gently stroked its head, mindful of its injuries. Easy there, feller. We're gonna get you help. He glanced up at Evelyn, her face etched with concern. Think you can stabilize him? I can try, Ishi replied, already unpacking her medical kit. But he's lost a lot of blood. What happened here, Riley? Doesn't matter now. Just focus on him. He watched Evelyn work, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. We need to move fast. Elder Kai said the source is further west, near the old quarry. He gathered his team, their faces grim. All right, listen up. Kai says the glyphs are weakened there, poisoning the land. We neutralize the source. We heal the valley. Evelyn, you and Ben stay here with the bobcat. The rest of us move out. We follow Kai's directions exactly. No deviations. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the sickly sweet scent of decay. As they moved westward, the vibrant green of the forest gradually faded, replaced by skeletal trees and barren earth. The ground crunched underfoot, a stark contrast to the soft earth they had walked on earlier. They found the quarry a gaping wound in the earth, filled with stagnant water that shimmered with an unnatural sheen. Twisted metal and rusted machinery lay scattered around its edges, silent monuments to a forgotten industry. In the center, etched into a large boulder, were the glyphs, glowing with a faint, malevolent light. This is it, O'Reilly said, his voice barely a whisper. Remember what Kai taught us. He raised his hand, and the team fanned out, each taking a position around the glyph. They began to chant, their voices a low hum that resonated with the ancient energy of the land. The glyphs pulsed brighter, then flickered, the unnatural light fading to a dull ember. The sickly smell began to dissipate, replaced by the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Back at the makeshift camp, the bobcat stirred. Evelyn looked up, a tired smile on her face. He's going to make it. Riley nodded, relief washing over him. He looked out over the recovering valley, the first rays of dawn painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. I'm not going back to Pendleton, he announced, his voice firm. I'm staying here. This place, it needs someone. Bob gave his life for it. I'm going to dedicate mine to protecting it.